In 2017, my family moved to an old estate on the edge of a dense forest in the Pacific Northwest. I was 10 at the time. The property was massive, bordered by a gray, fog-heavy creek. Our only neighbor lived in a house that looked like it was being swallowed by the earth. It was a crooked, 3-story Victorian that had been patched together with mismatched wood and rusted tin. Even on a sunny day, that house looked like it was weeping. The neighbors were 2 sisters in their late 80s and their 3 grandchildren. The eldest grandson was Silas. He was my age, but Silas wasn't like other kids. He had a habit of appearing in our yard without making a sound. I'd be sitting on our porch, and I'd look up to find Silas just standing by the tree line, staring at me with a blank, unblinking expression. One afternoon, I found him in our shed, holding a rusted garden rake, whispering to himself in a language I didn't recognize. When he saw me, he just grinned, a wide, unnatural smile that didn't reach his eyes. His mother, Miriam, was the strangest of them all. She was incredibly tall and always wore long, flowing black dresses that looked out of place in the muddy countryside. One day, she waved me over, claiming her sink was clogged and Silas wasn't home to help. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The stench hit me instantly, a mix of wet dog, sour milk, and something metallic. The hallways were lined with bags of rotting trash. But when she led me into her private study, the world changed. It was spotless. The walls were covered in deep red velvet, and the air smelled of heavy incense. She pointed to an old iron-bound book on her desk. The cover was embossed with a strange, weeping eye symbol. She leaned in close, her breath cold, and whispered, "Silas says you have the gift. You see the threads of the world, don't you? The ones that bleed?" I didn't stay to answer. I bolted out of that house and didn't stop until I locked myself in my room. Years later, I heard that Silas was taken away by the state after a violent incident involving a local animal. The family vanished overnight. Recently, someone told me they saw Miriam leading a small group of truth seekers in a remote mountain camp. Every time I look at those woods today, I feel like Silas is still there, standing just beyond the fog, waiting for the threads to bleed. I met a guy named Julian during my first year of university. We bonded over local basketball and late-night gym sessions. Julian seemed like a normal, high-energy guy, but as the months went by, a darker side emerged. He struggled with explosive anger. If I didn't reply to his texts within 10 minutes, he would send dozens of messages, alternating between begging for my time and cursing me out for betraying the friendship. Eventually, I started making excuses to avoid him. I told him my workload was too heavy or that I was visiting family. One night, around 1 a.m., I was in my apartment when I heard a faint scratching at my door. I looked through the peephole. Julian was standing there in the dark hallway. He wasn't knocking. He was just leaning his forehead against the wood, perfectly still. I froze, holding my breath. After 5 minutes of total silence, he just turned around and walked away, his footsteps heavy and slow. A week later, a mutual friend called me, sounding terrified. He had found out that Julian had been arrested in high school for a brutal assault on an ex-partner involving a weapon. He warned me that Julian was unstable and fixated on me. I immediately blocked him on every platform. That same night, my roommates were away. It was raining hard. I was in the kitchen when I felt a cold chill. I looked toward the glass sliding door that led to our ground floor balcony. The security light outside had been smashed. In the dim glow of a distant street lamp, I saw a tall, hooded figure standing right against the glass. It was Julian. He was holding a heavy kitchen knife against his own palm, staring directly at me through the window. He mouthed the words, "Let me in, we're not finished." I grabbed my phone, ran into the bathroom, and locked the door while calling the police. By the time they arrived, he had vanished into the rain. They never found him. To this day, I check the locks on my windows 3 times every night. I know he's still out there, and I know he still thinks we aren't finished. In the autumn of 2022, I took a girl named Chloe to a late-night screening of a new indie horror flick. We chose a historic, run-down theater on the edge of the industrial district. The place was a relic: creaky floorboards, faded red curtains, and a lobby that smelled like stale popcorn and damp basement. The ticket taker told us with a smirk that we had the entire theater to ourselves. We sat right in the center of Theater 4. It was cavernous and freezing. About 10 minutes into the trailers, the heavy double doors at the back groaned open. A man walked in. He didn't have any snacks or a drink. He didn't look at his phone for a seat number. He walked with a limp straight down the aisle and sat directly behind us. Not a row back, literally the seat right behind mine. I felt the back of my chair vibrate as he sat down. I whispered to Chloe, "This has to be a joke." She gripped my hand, her face pale. I turned around to give the guy a look, but the words died in my throat. He was an older man, maybe in his 50s, wearing a tattered gray hoodie. He wasn't looking at the screen. His head was tilted to the side, his eyes locked onto the back of my skull. He didn't blink once. We tried to focus on the movie, but the atmosphere had turned poisonous. Then, I felt it. A soft, warm sensation on the back of my neck. He was leaning forward, his face inches from mine, exhaling long, slow breaths onto my skin. It was the most violating feeling I've ever experienced. I stood up and said, "Come on, Chloe, we're leaving." As we scrambled toward the exit, I looked back. The man hadn't moved. He was still sitting there in the dark, staring at our empty seats as if we were still sitting in them. I reported him to the manager. The manager sighed and rubbed his eyes. "That's the regular," he said. "He buys a ticket for every late show. He never watches the movies. He just waits for someone to sit near him. We can't ban him because he doesn't technically break any rules." We ran to the car and locked the doors. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I looked at the theater entrance. The man was standing under the flickering neon sign, watching our car drive away. He wasn't a movie fan. He was a hunter, and Theater 4 was his blind.